Good day and welcome to another exciting class with us. It is CompTIA A Plus Code 2, Lesson 12. If you've been following our classes, I want to say congratulations so far for getting to Lesson 12 with us. And also for the knowledge that you've gained so far. And if you are new to this channel, this is Tech Aeon Academy, a channel where we provide IT trainings for everyone. If you are seeking a career in IT, if you're already in IT, this is the station for you to upskill, to learn more, to know and be able to carry out, execute practicals when it comes to technology, various platforms in IT, servers, platform, Linux, Microsoft system, the cloud solution, CompTIA A+, Security Plus, Cyber Security, and you can name them. With this channel, we want to let you know that all your technical issues when it comes to these various areas of information, they will be solved. Okay, so I want to encourage you, if you are new to this channel, to just hit the subscribe button so that once we upload videos and trainings, practicals, and latest news in cybersecurity, in technology world, you will be getting them. So kindly hit the subscribe button so that you can be part of us. Thank you. So without much ado, we're gonna move on to our training for lesson 12, which is identifying OS types and features. Our objective for this training, this lesson 12, is two. We're going to explain the operating system types. Then we're going to compare Windows edition. It's going to be a very short training. So we want to tell you about the operating system, the type of OS, and how you can compare them. Okay, so now let's look at Windows and Mac OS. Windows and Mac OS. So basically, there are two types of OS that we have in the tech world, in the IT world, right? So in the tech cyberspace, there are virtually two major kind of OS that you're going to see. Of course, there are other OS, but when it comes to tech world, I mean, those in technology. So the OS we are familiar with, the Microsoft Windows, is the most used OS in the entire world. Why? Because the Microsoft Windows, they are user-friendly OS, right? So it's the most used Windows in the entire world, right? They also have the Mac OS too. So the Mac OS, is also another popular OS too. Like if those of us who are used to Apple systems, Apple devices. So if you're used to Apple devices, then welcome to the Mac world, the Mac operating system world, which is Macintosh. So they are the owners, who develop OS for Apple devices. So Apple devices use more of Mac OS, right? Okay, so let's go. So we want to talk about operating system, and types. There are different kinds of operating systems, that is designed for various purposes. So we have operating systems that are just developed for clients. We call them business client OS. Right? We also have the networking operating system too. So the network system, when we talk about network operating system, we're talking about operating system that are strictly for networking. So even in Windows too, there are operating system that are majorly for clients. Windows has OS for clients. They have OS for networking too. In the OS, they have the network operating system in the OS enables the operating system to recognize the networking device and for network to be performed in the network environment. So we also have a unique networking operating system too. We have home clients like home edition kind of operating system. We have that too. Cell phone too have their own OS. Cell phone, your smartphone, they have their own OS. You understand? So all these are Android is one of the OS too for our cell phone. Apple iOS too. And iOS is the operating system for Apple devices. So away from that too, we have the Microsoft Windows. So earlier days Microsoft have evolved from one version of Microsoft to the other. Back in the days we used to have Microsoft Windows 95, we have 98, upgradable, we have Windows Millennium, we have Windows 2000, just name them, Windows XP and on and on and on. Windows Vista, you just name them, Windows 7, just name them. But now, the latest version of Windows is Windows 11. The previous version was Windows 10, but now we have Windows 11 edition. And of course, Microsoft is going to come up with a new and updated version of Windows, right? Then aside for the Windows 10 and Windows 11 edition, we have the Windows Server version. So when we talk about the Windows 10, Windows 11, earlier we talked about what? Client OS. So the Windows 10, Windows 11, they are made majorly for client users. I mean client user, I mean users that just work and do basic stuff. All right, so if you have a desktop system, you have a desktop, you have a laptop, all right, and what you just do, just basic work. You do the office work, internet work, and stuff that you do. So you don't do large processing. So those kind of OS, they are called client OS, all right. So the typical one is Windows 10 and Windows 11. All these are client operating system. But when you have a system, that is built to accommodate many users simultaneously, all right, and to do so many stuff in terms of security, you understand, and I can, like we said, I can serve other users. Apart from accommodate, can also serve other users in the network. You want to perform network environment, you want to implement security, so many things, encryption, and on and on and on. In an enterprise environment, you want the server that will be dedicated, to attend to other devices on the network, other users. Then you need what? A Windows Server a Windows Server version, which we call a Windows Server operating system. And there are many of them, so many of Windows Server, right? We know so many of the typical one is Microsoft Windows Server 2019. That's the typical Windows Server. So we have more and more and more, all right? Okay, good. So now we also have Apple Macintosh OS 2, So this OS, they are, like you see, they're licensed for installation on Microsoft, on Apple products and the MacBook hardware. So the Apple Macintosh OS, they're designed and licensed majorly from Apple products too. For Apple products, MacBook and on and on and on. So they are just purely for Apple. Then when you talk about the upgrading version and compatibility, we need to understand that the Apple products, right, they are not compatible with Microsoft. They are not upgradable to Microsoft products. They are not also compatible. So it's a different line entirely. They're two different family. So the Apple have their own family. Windows have their own family. So in other words, if you use Windows OS, right, you can upgrade from Windows OS to the other, right? But you cannot upgrade from Windows OS to Apple. Similarly, too, if you're using Apple, you cannot upgrade from Apple to Windows because the Apple products are not compatible. But of course, you could upgrade for a lower version of Apple to a higher version of Apple. You can also update too, right? So that is that. Now let's look at Linux, Unix, Chrome OS. So usually we can call these three products, these three products, they are actually one family. Unix, Linux, Chrome, they are actually one family, right? Because they use the same distribution, they use the same kernel. Like we'll say kernel now, we say kernel. So kernel are just when we say kernel, they are the core part of the operating system, the core part, the basic functional unit of the operating system, the basic functional units. Just like we have a computer, right? In a computer, there's a basic functional part of the computer, which is the processor. The other part as well, but the basic core, the heart of the computer is the processor that does everything that happens within. There's memory, there's storage, there's hard drive, so many things happens, but the core part of the computer system is what is the processor. The same thing too, in Windows, there's a core part of the Windows, the core part, the basic function that give life to the Windows. Sorry, to the OS, to the OS, yes. So that give life to the OS. There's a core part of it that give life to that core part is called what? The kernel. So that breathes life to the OS. Even the other part, the other function of the OS, that area, but the core part, when Windows starts, there's some functions that have to be done, some foundational things that need to be done to be executed, system files that have to be done. So that we call it kernel. Then also distributions, right? Distribution in Linux, they are the full, the full package of the OS of Linux package, the full package. So the kernel, everything, the full package of OS, like you start your Linux, your Linux is going to load desktop environment, you have other applications, other part of it come together, so many things, the shell in Linux, so many things. So distribution of, if you hear about which of Linux distribution are using, they're telling about which version of what Linux are using. So distribution are the OS of Linux, the version, those are distribution, right? Good. So the kernel, every OS has a kernel, which we said is the core, the base functional unit of the what? Of the OS, right? You also have the open licensing and subscription. So we have to understand that Linux products, we have to understand Linux are open source. When we say open source, we're talking about an application that is there for the whole world. So it's an application, it's an OS that is there for everybody to go and use. So you can download it for free and start using it. You're not paying anything. Now, but we also have what we call the subscription model. Now, when we mean the subscription model, we're talking about, even the fact that Linux is open source, right? There's still organizations that can see, go for subscription-based Linux. Now, in other words, they want regular maintenance. They want updates. They want upgrade and patches and the rest. So those people, what they do, they go for subscription-based Linux, so that at every time they get the support, they get commercial support, security patches about the OS and on. So those are subscription-based Linux. But the open source Linux that you download, you don't get support, you don't get commercial support, you don't get security patches and lifecycle management. When we mean lifecycle management, we're talking about all the stages of the Linux, that is being developed at us every time. There's a new product, you are being updated, so long the Linux is being used, you're going to have management for your Linux, right? Okay, so the Linux too, like Microsoft, has the client version too, and also have the server version. They have client version and have server version, so it depends on the distribution. So we have a client version of Linux. So just like you have OS, so when you get to this Linux, you can use it for normal work, normal browsing, that's a typical example, right? Of, you understand? So one of them is Red Hat, right? So Red Hat, Ubuntu has a client version too, and they also have server version, right? Good. Then we also have Kali Linux. Kali Linux is a distribution of Linux, but it's for server version. Those cyber security experts, that what they use mostly. All right, so there's several distributions, several of them. Then, of course, apart from that, with Linux, there are embedded system. When I mean embedded system, most of those systems you see, like your phones, right? They are used for phones. They are used for phone, back end of phone, back end of most devices. You talk about operational technology, also operational technology, which is OT. We are talking about industrial systems, right? So, for instance, now, there are systems that you use in the hospital in health. So they're not typical computer system. They are health, for instance, scanning X-ray machine. So the software that powers it, we call them what? OT, optional technology. So those kind of system, what I call embedded system. So it's Linux that is used as the back end to host them, they build the technology on Linux, right? Then, furthermore, we have Google Chrome. So Google Chrome, we most of us, we are aware of Google Chrome, right? Google Chrome is the same family with Linux. Google Chrome, they use the same backend of Linux to build Google Chrome too, right? So, but Google Chrome, we know is that more for web application client. So Google Chrome is a web application client. Like, I want to browse, so I'm going to use Google Chrome. So Google Chrome is owned by Google itself. It's an OS, so you can download Google Chrome OS too. Apart from the web browser, you can download the OS and install it on your desktop. All right. So Google Chrome, they have their own app, their own desktop too, hardware that you can run it. So you can buy a tab, and the tab, just what you have, the OS there is Google Chrome OS you have. Then they have the web application too, which you can use for web client to browsing, which we know Google Chrome, the normal one, used to browse and the rest. Right? Okay, good. So now iOS and Android. So we talk about iOS and Android. We all know about this. So Android majorly for different kind of phones. Android are open source. They are open source, so you can just they are open source devices. You can develop application on Android. So your smartphone, your tablet PCs, all those ones, they are all most of them are Android. So, with the exception of Apple devices, right? Every other devices, every smartphone you have, all of them, they are built on what? Android. So that the OS that drives them is Android, with the exception of what? Apple devices. Apple devices, they use what? iOS, iPad, like iPad, iOS. They use what? iOS, Apple for that. That's what they use. So Android, they are specifically for tablets. Those tablet is Android, and they are open. So they're not vendor specific. When I mean vendor specific, in other words, it's not tailor made only for one particular device to use. So, but why Apple is vendor specific? Vendor specific, in other words, it has to be only Apple products that can work on them, right? Okay. So on and on. So you can get updates. All this, so you can get updates about all this Android and iOS. And so iOS, in a nutshell, iOS is just basically for what? Apple devices. That is iOS. Android is non-Apple devices. So that we're going to say about both of them, right? Excellent. Okay. So let's continue. Now, so we're going to look at file systems now. Now, when we say file systems, we're looking at one year of file systems, right? You're looking at how is this Windows, right? How they classify, how do they save their job, right? So how did they work? How did they save their work? So called a file system. So the file system is the back end of the system, the main thing that makes the operating system to work, to function. When you store files, how are they stored? In the file location table, in the hard drive, how are they stored? How are they managed? What can they do? What are the features of this file or this system of the OS? They call it a file system. So now, we have what called the NTFS. We call it's actually called new file system, right? But for the sake of the T that is there, we call it what? T becomes technology, but in abbreviation, we call it new file system. But again, because the T that is there, we call it what? Technology. So it could become new technology file system. Back in the days, right? Networking has limitations in networking back in the days, right? Because back then, network computers can only interact with just few, not expanded computers, just few. And they can do few things like permissions and stuff, like few things could do. Few less permissions, less security. That's how computers were characterized back then. Right, so they're more like in a work group environment. When I mean work group, there's no central server like that has central Windows server that has the features to be able to create some kind of securities and create some restrictions. They don't have it. So all computers within the network, they be able to work together as friends, as peers. Right? So that's kind of system. They use a file system called FAT file system, which is called file location table. Right? So that's how they store their work on the hard drive through the sector. We call it file. It's a legacy system. That is FAT. We call it legacy file system. So we have FAT. Then we also have FAT2. So FAT back then, we have FAT16 for the file system that was being used for older version of Windows, like Windows 95. They are Windows 95. Those are called FAT16. There's a Windows called Windows 3.6, 3.16 or so. Then you have to, before you can enter, you have to go to DOS command. I have to type Win. Those are legacy OS. They have to type Win. Then now it gets to Program Manager. So it's been a long journey, So you get a Program Manager. Then from there you can now move on, to Windows desktop environment. That was how the system was back then, right? From FAT16, they now move on towards FAT32. So FAT32 is just like an advanced, a modernized version of FAT16. So what's the basic difference between FAT and NTFS? The basic difference is that, like I said, the NTFS file system, we call it a new technology file system that was built, based on the limitation of FAT32. All right. So in this time around now, the NTFS file system has the ability, to do networking, create permission, create security, right? Create Windows volume, like in our previous class, talk about volume, Windows volume, right? Like RAID, software RAID, mirror volume, right? Spam volume, street volume, RAID 1, RAID 5. So we can do all these things now with what NTFS file system. But back then, you can't do them with FAT, because FAT, like I said, has the material on the networking. All right? Okay, so away from that too, we also have another one, extensible file allocation table. So this extensible file allocation table, right, is basically, it's basically it's used basically more like a Linux-based file system. They call it external file allocation table. It's more like a Unix-based file system. All right. So, it's an upgraded version of your FAT32. So these are files that you could see more like the Linux environment they use it, right? So now let's take a look at it now. Yeah, that's it. So Linux and Mac file system. So which is what they use, this extensible file system, which is what we talk about now. Let's see. Yes, yeah, that's it. So we have external file allocation. It was built based on it's an upgraded version of FAT32, and it is more like for the Mac environment, Mac and for Linux environment, right? Okay. So yeah, this is where we are now. Okay. So let's good. So now from the FAT extended file system 3, they now move on towards the 4th extended file system. So let's take a look at this now, so we can understand clearly. So we're talking about extensible file allocation table. Extensible file allocation table. So we said this is an expansion from what? From FAT32, right? So here now we have 4th extendable file system. So this 4th extendable file system, is an extended version of the first one, extended version of the first one we talk about. But this time around now, right? There's what we call journaling. Now, journaling, we want to talk about journaling. So, it's a system. The journal is a system that we kind of prevent loss of files, right? When I mean loss of files, so it has a way of tracking changes on the system. So when you are working, so the changes are not automatically saved to the hard drive. So it has a dedicated log whereby those files are being stored, all right? After which they cannot be transferred to the hard drive. We call it journaling. Like you see, journaling the file system is a file system that uses a dedicated log, to track changes before writing them to the main hard drive. So you're going to track the changes. When you save the work, they're not saved automatically. It's going to track it, save it, inside the journal, which is a dedicated log, save it there. Then after the changes have been made, they can transfer them later to the hard drive. So it just helps to just ensure that you don't lose files. And just in case computer goes off. So these are what we see mostly in the Linux environment. So Windows 32, they all see mostly in Linux. So Linux environment, they use external file system. All right. So now Apple has the Apple file system too. So why Linux use this, right? And popular choice for Linux storage. So that's what it is for in Linux storage, right? So they have they have a call for 2-bit addressing scheme. All right. Don't know more about addressing scheme. So when we look at IP address, you understand more about addressing scheme for 3-bit addressing, 2-bit addressing, and on and on. Now, if you go to Apple system, Apple has a file system. So Apple system actually don't use X4, right? They use their own file system to work. They don't use 4th external file system. They use Apple file system. So the Apple file system is a 2-bit addressing, which also does journaling too. So it does journaling and does encryption too. Okay, so let's look at the OS compatibility now. So it's very important that before you get an OS, buy an OS, you have to see the hardware is compatible with your OS. So you don't just buy it. So when you want to buy an OS, if you are buying Windows 11, they have hardware requirements So go and look at the hardware requirement. The hardware requirement will tell you which hardware is going to work with, right? It's going to tell you which devices it's going to work with, what memory, what kind of memory is going to work with, what type of processor architecture, what memory size is going to support, right? So all this software, everything they have, even networking to everything. So they have all those things as well, right? So your hardware compatibility, your operating system has compatibility. So it's not every devices that that your operating system will work with. So you must check the requirements. So you go to, if you want to buy Microsoft product, go to Microsoft.com and go to their support. Then go to once you're at Microsoft website, go to support. When you're there, then you can type the OS. If you're buying, maybe you want to buy Windows 11, right? So you could look at, or you want to install Windows 11. Maybe you have a laptop, right? And you want to install Windows 11, or you want to upgrade your laptop. Before you upgrade that laptop, either Windows 11 Home Edition, all right, or Windows 11 Professional, or Windows 11, Windows 11 Professional. The first thing is, before you begin the upgrade, so don't waste time and waste energy and resources. The first thing you need to do is to go to your Windows and go to your Microsoft website, Microsoft.com. Go there, then type in what you see. When you go to Microsoft.com, just navigate support. Navigate again. You can see, about search. Type it there. Other requirements. Windows 11. It's going to give you, and you can look at them. So there to tell you every requirement need, what kind of processor what type of processor that system needs. It's going to tell you, the system will tell you everything. The kind of memory, the size that is minimum memory RAM requirement, architecture types. It will tell you the bits of the OS too. You can know them that you can work with. So the same way, your network, everything, you have to look at the software compatibility, everything. So it's very important. Compatibility is very important. If not, you have issues. If you try to update the system, right, it's going to give you some issues. You understand? Okay. So it's also very important too that we also know about that, right? Very, very important. Then also you can do a PC Edge glance, right, on your desktop. You can do PC Edge checker. So you can go to your system and do a PC Edge checker. So you we explained this in our previous lesson, how you can be able to navigate and check for you. So you can go to system requirement, not system requirement, go to desktop, you go to your start menu, just type PC Edge at a glance, then go to PC Edge checker. PC Edge checker. So without going to Microsoft, it will be able to look at the system, and see if the system is compatible with that OS you want to install. The hardware, look at it and tell you, just like we have here now. See, this PC doesn't correctly meet Windows 11 system requirements. So it's going to tell you. That means you cannot upgrade to Windows 11. So it's very important, right? Okay, nice. So we also have vendor lifecycle limitations. So vendor lifecycle. So every OS, every product, not just OS, hardwares, any products, they have a life cycle, right? Everything have a life cycle. If you buy a motor vehicle, anything, they have a life cycle. Time where you have to know, after some time, this thing don't function anymore. So Windows is not an exception. Software is not an exception. All software, they have life cycle, right? So in other words, at that point in time, the vendor, the maker of those products, they will stop working on that product. Instead, they'll move on another product. So when they stop working on, which means support will stop, update will stop. You no more get updates, no more get support on that product. So when that life cycle, when it comes to an end, right? So that's what we call that product now end of life, EOL, end of life. It means that product have gone to the end of life. Manufacturer, they phase away that product. They don't care about it. Typical example is Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows 2000, Windows XP, Windows 7. You understand? All these are OS that were back then were being used, but now they've been phased out. They're end of life. Microsoft don't support them anymore. Windows 10, typical example too. Microsoft don't support those products anymore. So those products, if you are using this product, your network, your system is exposed to attack. Your system is vulnerable to attack. So you can get different, you can get malware attack, right? You can get hardware attack. You can get so many attacks. You can get, you can mistakenly install something, malicious code on your system, because what your system is not. If you go to the internet, you can install malicious code on your system. And when malicious code is installed on your system, it has so many effects that make your system. Number one, it could create a backdoor for an attacker to come in. So it's very important that when you notice your system, when you notice your system is, your OS, whatever you're using, is getting to the end of life, it's getting to the end of support, dephase it and go for a new one. So very important, right? Okay, so that is it. So we move now to 12B. So now we'll look at how do we compare Windows Edition. So we have Windows Edition, many of them. So the first thing we'll look at is the Windows bit type. In Windows has version, Windows has 32 version and 64 version. So earlier in our classes, we explained those versions, right? 32, 64-bit OS, what can it do? We explained them. We won't explain processor architecture type, processor 2. They have architecture type. We explained all those ones in our earlier classes. Now, just know that every operating system you are buying, especially Windows OS, especially, right? They have a bit system, that could work with us, that has some specific features. Take for instance now, you don't have you want a lighter Windows, and your laptop, your system you're using doesn't have large resources. So the processor is not large, so it's not very big. The capacity of the processor is not that you can't do every work. So maybe you have a lesser processor. I'm talking about your system now, and you have your memory is not large, So your motherboard too. Most of the things in motherboard, they are just built for basic use, not for extensive use. Now, those kind of hardwares you have, right? They can only work in a lesser Windows. So Microsoft, they have a Windows that can host this kind of lesser devices, lesser hardware with lesser requirements. So Microsoft hardware ways with that, right? And those kind of hardwares, you have, they're not expensive, right? So you don't go and buy an expensive hardware. You know that what you just do, just few things. You just do few things. You do limited things, browsing and stuff like that. That we just do. So why you go and buy, spend money? So to save money, that's why Microsoft creates a lesser version of OS that can be used for office use, not office use, home use, home user, right? So they create those kind of OS for that. So that OS called 32-bit OS that has fewer things, could support limited resources. Yes, you can go. If you have limited resources, if you have your laptop, use 32-bit, it will work for you. So the OS type 32-bit, so you buy the OS and install it. Yes. If you have 64-bit, it's very expensive. Graphics, have high graphics, streaming, software development, deployment of applications, so many things. Cyber security, you want to create security in your organization, large network places, you have so many things. Then you have to look at what 64-bit OS. So 64-bit OS, they also support what processor, huge processor architecture like x64 OX architecture, right? Larger memory space, motherboard, high motherboard capacity, which is actually the processor architecture, like x64, all right? So when you have the kind of, say, you want to server OS, you want to do all these kind of things, then what do you do now? You can go and look for 64-bit OS. If you are doing virtualization, right, on top of virtualization, we explained virtualization earlier. If you want to do virtualization, you cannot do virtualization with what? 32-bit. So virtualization, whereby one device is hosting multiple applications. One device can have multiple applications. Where when we mean multiple application, we are just being advanced, right? We are referring to one device having multiple virtual machine. And in a virtual machine, what is there? Is applications that are inside. So that's why I say multiple application, right? So we're actually referring to virtual machines. So virtualization is where we have a device, talking about a device, one device that can host several virtual machines. Now, a several device, several pieces exist in that PC. We call it virtualization. So if you're buying multiple computers, just get one computer. Inside that computer, you can create several computers. We call it virtualization. You can only do that in this 4-bit OS. You can't do that in 32-bit OS. All right? It's okay. So let's move on. Good. So home edition. So we'll talk about home edition. What do we mean by home edition? Windows Home Edition. So the Windows Home Edition, that just system. I look at the name imply. You just want it small to work at home. You do limited things. What you do mostly just to send email. Maybe to work on Microsoft Word and and save on system, data processing, small work. Those things we call it. You don't need to go and buy Windows Enterprise Edition or Professional Edition. You don't need. Just Home Edition is okay. Most of the laptops you buy, right? Most of the laptops you buy, you go to the market, you buy a laptop. They are made for home use, not for work environment, right? You just buy them for home. So those ones, you don't need to do much thing, just small work, family member, share between your family, small thing, transfer by copy files, pasting of files, entertainment, watching videos. Those are home edition. Now, when you want to move on now to look at work in a company organization, right? So you want to work in an organization, you don't need home edition, because why home edition is not built to work in a network environment. No. So you cannot do security is not there. You cannot do sharing of files. In terms of I'm not about copying files now. Like where you have a server network. So you have a server network whereby the client will have to go and get resource from the server. Home edition will not work there because why? Home edition have limited capacity, and ability to work in a network size environment. So it's very important that you know those things about home edition. So if you're using Windows home edition right now, you still in home edition right now, all right? And you're trying to upgrade it, and you're trying to join a domain network, just now it's not going to be possible, right? And you're trying to do some certain things, you're trying to do virtualization, it's not going to work. You can't do virtualization in Windows edition. Most of the things we talk about, you can't do so many things we've been talking about, encryption and so many things in a larger scale, you can't do that, right? You can do encryption on your hard drive, but in terms of enterprise, you cannot do it. When you're in the network, you cannot do that, right? You also cannot do so many things that you cannot do, so many. Because that OS is strictly home edition, so you just cannot do that. All right? Okay. So again, too, you cannot upgrade Windows home edition to professional. You cannot do that. You can only do that if you are connected to Microsoft OEM. Like you have to connect to Microsoft website, then you cannot pay money. You cannot do it. But by yourself, you cannot do that. You have to pay them. Microsoft cannot help to upgrade it. So home edition and professional are two separate people, two different OEM, so they are two different, they are not two different OEM. I'm talking about original equipment manufacturer OEM. So they are two different OEM, they are not same. Right? So home edition professional. So what I was saying, we're saying that home edition are just for limited resources. So if you have a computer to the same thing like we explained in the previous slide, right? If you have a system, it's not large, you don't want much to be done, just get home edition, buy home edition. So you just do few stuff and stuff like that. Home edition will be okay because it doesn't contain so much, right? It doesn't require much processing, it doesn't require much processor, it doesn't require so much RAM. What you do, just basic things you do. That's called home edition, right? So that is about the home edition, right? Okay, so now, I will now move further now to work environment, education, universities, secondary school, all the schools. You need a higher operating system, not home edition. You need professional. Look at it. We have professional here, enterprise, education edition. So Windows have all these ones: professional edition, enterprise edition. Even for education, universities and rights, you could give the OS for education, right? So you can do for all the system. And again, all this network we talk about, when Windows edition, we said they cannot join network, we are right. They can only be work group. See, here we have domain access versus work group access. So when we say domain access and work group, what do we mean? What are the difference between a domain and a work group? Now, if you're following us, we will explain all these things. So first of all, look at a domain. Now, a domain is a logical group of network that share common resources. All right, whereby a system, is dedicated to act as a server that provides resources, and also has a directory service in place that keeps track of every user on the network. A directory service like is a server that has what we call active directory. So that active directory is a database that keeps track of every user on the network. That's a domain network. So you must have a centralized server that acts as a domain. That's acts as a domain controller that controls everything in the network. It keeps tracks. Now, away from that, what is a work group? Now, a work group network, right, is a typical network environment whereby you don't have a dedicated system, no dedicated server. Everybody works together, they work as peers. All the computers, they work together. For instance, now, this my system is a Windows system, right? Windows Professional, right? I have a Windows Professional here system, right? And a colleague wants to connect to my system, wants to copy some files, right? Now, without thinking of using flash drive, right? I could just network the two computers together without a server. I'll just network them. When I network them together, I give them a common name. When I give them a common name, go on work group. So which means two computers cannot share files. That's a work group network. Because why? There's no dedicated server there, like an OS. that will act as a server. It's just two Windows professional computer at work or two Windows client computer. Two client computer that are called work group computers. So that work group, they work as pairs. No one is higher because they're all Windows. But when we say domain, it means you must have a server system that will act, as the central controller. So everybody has to connect to it. So you have a server OS, server operating system now. So then we have a domain network. So everybody that wants to connect to the domain, like we said, logical grouping of computers in the network, everybody has to connect to the domain. They must be authenticated. When we say authenticated, they must have a username, a password. They used to sign in to the network, to the domain. Not to the computer now, to the domain. Right? Okay. So away from that too, Windows have, we have your all these professional edition. They have so many features like group policy. You can do a central administration. In our previous video, that's lesson in our previous lesson 11, we talk about group policy. We explained how you can do group policy, how you can be able to, you have users who perform the similar tasks, right? So instead of it to allow the users, go and you can just create a simplified way whereby put all these in one group and give it a name, right? So the system has a default policies. So policies are just a way that people have to follow. They're just a procedure. Everyone must follow that procedure. It's a policy. It's a discipline way to be able to manage people. So people have to follow it. It's called policy. So there are group of policies in your system, default one that you could use. So you create a policy and you put every computer in that group, right? Then you put it in that group. You apply the policy to that group. So everybody now that work on the system, they have to follow whatever is on that policy. So that is good policy, right? On and on. So BitLocker is all about encryption, right? It's all about encryption, so how you can encrypt your system, encrypt your hard drive, BitLocker. They also have remote desktop server too. So a remote desktop server, what does it imply? Now we can have all this remote desktop server in our Windows professional environment, right? It implies that, right, you have a server, a terminal server, right? You have a terminal server that you have a particular software, maybe you run you have a specialized application, right? So in that special application, you want everybody, to use the application to work. So the application is not installed on that system; it's installed on the remote system. So, but you want everybody to use the application on that system that is installed remotely. You can only achieve that through what called terminal service, and that terminal service you have to set up a remote desktop server. So that desktop server, people will share that desktop. So when they log into that system remotely, they will use the application on that server to work. So that is that. So this thing we talk about now with Windows Professional Edition, Enterprise, and Education, they have all these features. Unlike the previous one, the Home Edition we just spoke about. So these are the two different types of Windows, right? So now we looking at the sizes of Windows. Professional, what basic work with clients. So professional edition, the Windows Professional, they're for client, they're Windows for clients. They have, of course, volume licensing. Volume licensing means you can buy license. If you have like 50 users, you can buy license for 50 users. So you just buy one OS. When you buy one OS, all right, then you have the license. You can install that OS for 50 users. Put the license there to work, all right. So now it's telling that Windows Professional can take 2 terabytes of hard drive and 2 processor, two CPU sockets. Now it can support a motherboard that has 2 processors. You can support it, right? And 128 core CPU core limit. So it supports all these ones. Now, Windows Professional for workstations, right? This Windows Professional workstation, same feature as said as Pro, same resources limited as Enterprise. Windows Enterprise. So Windows Enterprise is above Windows Professional. All right, so Enterprise Edition is above Windows Professional. You're talking about some that has more features, is more advanced, it has more features, and it can accommodate more users too. So we call it Enterprise for like a company organization that has so thousands and thousands of users, of staff, of employees, so they can look at Windows Enterprise Edition. It has so many features, so many things. Look at the word volume licensing, so you can have so many thousands of users. You could do volume license for everybody. So you just buy the Windows Enterprise Edition, buy Windows Enterprise Edition. As you buy it, you get your license for everybody. Everybody use it, right? Then it can take as well as 6 terabytes RAM and 4 CPU sockets. What means CPU socket? In other words, the motherboard can take 4 CPUs, 4 processors can take 4 processors. That's what we are seeing there. So again, you only see Enterprise Edition in multinational companies, right? That would say Enterprise Edition, not for smaller company and medium side. They use Windows Professional. That would they use, and even schools they use that, right? Again, schools also there's an OS for school, for universities and school. They call it Education Enterprise. So that one is not. It's just made for things they do in education. It's not like Windows 8, but it has some features to support schooling, education, and on like that. All right, okay. So then upgrade and how do upgrade Windows 11 and install patches and the rest. How do upgrade it Windows. So now we need to understand how to upgrade for Windows, right? Take a look at the upgrade part here. Say Windows 11 to Windows 10, Windows 10 to Windows 11. Now, what I'm telling you is that earlier version of Windows, you cannot jump ship. You cannot jump ship from earlier version of Windows to Windows 11. You have to follow the hierarchy. What do we mean? Now, it means that, right, if my computer is Windows 10 today, if my computer now I'm using Windows 10, and the next version of Windows is Windows 11, then Microsoft now release another OS called what? Windows 12, right? Which is higher than Windows 11. I cannot jump ship. I cannot jump from Windows 10 all the way to what? Windows 12. It's not going to work. Right? It's not upgradable like that. So I need to upgrade to Windows 11, then from Windows 11 to what? Windows 12. So that's what you see here, upgrade part. So if you use Windows 7, yes, you can upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 10, yes. But you cannot upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. If you have Windows 10, you can upgrade to Windows 10 to Windows 11. But you cannot upgrade from Windows 10 to a higher version of Windows that Microsoft released. Not possible. Right? Good. So, always update your system. Very important. Always update to keep your system compatible and to be able to fight against virus, malicious software and applications, malicious code, and unwanted download on your system. You must always update Windows. Always update your OS. Always. So you make your system robust and secure, and to fight against worm attack, viruses, spyware, malware, in various things. So always update your OS. Always update your OS. Right. So that brings us to the end of lesson 12. Thank you for following us. So again, please can subscribe to our station and also also help to send our station to your friends and colleagues so that you can follow our trainings on in terms of IT and stuff. So thank you. I'll see you in lesson